Fright Fiends, and thanks so much for dropping by the Horror Zone. I hope everyone's doing well. Today's video is going to be talking about a film franchise that really means a lot to me. It's a film franchise that became a staple for me every Halloween. It also brought me back to a time from my childhood when I looked forward to horror movies or genre movies that would release every year. So you get Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, and Halloween. Those franchises, there was typically, especially with Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street, there was typically a new installment every year. If not every year, there was usually maybe a one-year gap. But for the most part, every 1 to 2 years you could count on a brand new film in that franchise, and that's why there's so many. And that was like just sort of typical for the 80s and when I was a kid. And in 2004, thanks to Lee Winnell and James Wan, the Saw franchise started. And I had heard about it because it made the festival circuits before debuting in theaters. This was kind of the rebirth of horror. I mean, we did have the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake come out a year before this, but horror was kind of trying to find its footing. You had the resurgence of the slasher films thanks to Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Urban Legend, in the late 90s. And then after Scream 3, things kind of got a little bit different, and there was the Final Destination franchise and Jeepers Creepers, but there wasn't anything that was kind of like this huge thing that everybody was going to see and that was immensely popular and sort of was mainstream, that kind of brought in not only the horror fans but people that were just curious about what the film's subject matter dealt with. Saw was kind of what led the way to the term torture porn. I've never liked that term. I do agree that there are some film series that have kind of towed the line, and it works a lot more towards them than I think Saw. You have movies like Hostel, you have Human Centipede, Captivity, Turistas. There's a lot of them out there that are just a little too extreme for my taste. I really don't like those kinds of films where it's just torture for the sake of torture. With Saw, I always felt like Saw was a mystery. And the first Saw film, much like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, is not really that violent. It's more implied. There are some quick scenes where you do see some pretty, horrific situations and setups. But for the most part, the gore is very tame. It wasn't until the sequels where it kind of got a little bit more extreme and over the top. But I think the original Saw is a fantastic film. My wife and I went and saw it. We had only been married about a year when this movie came out. And I still remember going to a very crowded theater. It was a Friday night, the night that it opened. And I was a fan of Danny Glover. Carrie Elways I knew from films like Princess Bride and Kiss the Girls and Liar Liar. I'd seen him in quite a few things. And I was curious what this film was going to be like. And I remember watching it and not really knowing where it was going to go. And as it played out, I realized how brilliant it was. This is a brilliant film, masterfully directed, excellently written. I think the cast does a great job. A lot of people think Carrie Elways is very over the top, which kind of works for his character because his character is kind of a slimy guy. So you kind of see somebody that has a lot of control in his life, and because he's chained up in this disgusting bathroom, that plays on his psyche and on his, just his performance and his demeanor. I really think Carrie Elways does a good job. The ending of this film is still, I think, one of the most haunting and amazing endings because it was something that shocked the hell out of me and shocked the hell out of everyone in the audience. And I looked forward to the second one, which they greenlit right after this one came out. And every year there was a new Saw film, going up until 2010, which was 10 years ago. So on the 29th of October, 2010, Saw the final chapter came out. And why I wanted to do this kind of tribute series to this franchise, I'm not really going to be going into great details on my rankings of the films, but I thought I would close it out with ranking them. But why this series was so special to me, and why I am looking forward to Spiral. And I did really enjoy Jigsaw, which came out about 3 years ago. This series brought me back to my youth, and there was horror franchises like Friday the 13th and A Nightmare on Elm Street that we could look forward to as kids every year. And after, 1989, when Jason Takes Manhattan and Nightmare on Elm Street 5: The Dream Child came out, after that there wasn't anything like that. These kind of events that you could look forward to every year, these horror movie events is what I like to call them, they didn't make the sequels anymore. Yes, you had Freddy's Dead and Jason Goes to Hell, but those were two movies, and for the most part, leading up until Freddy vs. Jason in 2003, it was kind of a dry decade with regards to horror movie franchises. And Saw just kind of was one that just took off. And the thing I love about this franchise, I love the fact that every movie had its own little mystery, and every story, even though it was contained, it always pulled something in from the previous movie or set something up for the next movie. And I don't think a lot of people give credit to these films. So I will showcase my DVDs. This is Saw 6, showed the final chapter. I still have Saw 5, which has the...
You thought it was over, but the games have just begun.
I can't believe it still works. I've had this thing for like 12 years now. You have Saw 4, Saw 3, Saw 2. Particular cover, you can see the keen is that right there. And of course, like I started the video with the original Saw. This used to have blood in it, but it all evaporated. So now you just have the saw blade that floats up and down here. And so you have the core films here, and then I got the pack, the Blu-ray pack with all 7 of them. And then of course we have Jigsaw, which came out a couple years ago, which I did enjoy. And I'm really looking forward to Spiral, the fact that Darren Lynn Bousman's coming back after directing Saws 2, 3, and 4. Yeah, the franchise means a lot to me, and I think it gets a lot of unfair hate from people because they look at it just as a torture series. And yes, as I said, as the films went on, the traps got more and more extreme. Some of them were completely unbelievable. But the most part of it is, like, I still thought it was fun. I think if you strip the gore out of some of the films, they were still interesting. There was this mystery element to them. You're like, how is this happening? Especially when, characters that you thought had passed away, but then they somehow show up in a later entry. I really just think that even though you had Lee Winnell write the first 3, and then you had Marcus Dunstan and Patrick Melton come in and write the next 4, I thought they all worked. They were all one cohesive story. And the other thing that's really special about this franchise is that my brother-in-law, John, and I really bonded over them. My wife and I have only been married, like I said, a small, we'd only been married a couple years, and her brother is about 10 years younger than me. After Saw 2, my wife kind of had her fill of the franchise, so my brother-in-law and I started going to them. So from Saws 3 to 7, and even Jigsaw, we went and saw them together. We hung out, we went out and had lunch or dinner before seeing them. So it was like a real cool bonding experience because we were both into horror films, and it meant a lot to me having those memories. And it really took me back to when I was a kid, and my friends Mike and Scott and all these other guys that I lost touch with over the years when we would go see a Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th or Halloween or something like that. It just really took me back there, and being older, it really just, you don't think you're going to get those times back. And it was just like, it brought me back to being a teenager and going in to see these films and being excited about what the next entry was going to be like. And yeah, I really hold those memories and experiences dear to my heart, and this franchise means a lot to me. Like I said, I love all of the films, and I'm really looking forward to what Spiral is going to be like. I'm very disappointed, of course, like most horror films and films in general this year, it being pushed back to next year. But yeah, Chris Rock's in it. I don't know how it's going to fit into this universe. I don't think Tobin Bell's going to be in it. But yeah, I'm really curious. Darren Bousman, I think, is a fantastic director. He directed some of the best entries in the franchise, so really curious to see what it's going to be like. To rank the films, like I said, I like all of them, so I'm not going to go into a lot of details about why they are the way they are in terms of my ranking, but I did put them all down on a little post-it here, and I'm just going to go through and break down which one's my favorite and which one's my least favorite. So starting with my favorite Saw film, we're going to go with Saw 2. Now, I did a review of these films way back in 2012. I'll put a link down below to those videos because I split it up into 2 videos. They're really long-winded. But my picks have changed a little bit, but my number 1 has always stayed the same. I don't know why I like Saw 2 so much. I think I just like the confinement of the house and the fact that there's this gas that's being pumped into it, and at the same time you have this task force that's located Jigsaw, and you have the Donnie Wahlberg character, and his son is in this house, so you're playing against the clock of his son dying from this gas and all of these traps that these people have to go through to get the antidote. This was the film that kind of turned my wife off from the entire franchise, but because it was too much for her. But for me, it's always been my favorite, and it remains the same. Since I saw it, I remember this is what made me a fan of the franchise and what made me anxiously anticipate the next entry. So yeah, Saw 2. Next, my second favorite in the franchise is Saw 6. I thought the subject for this one was pretty spot on, especially in the political climate that was going on at the time and now, dealing with insurance companies and how unfair they are. I don't know, I think it's a great entry, and it's another one where the ending just kind of shocked me, and it surprised me where it was going. I didn't know where it was going, and this was another one that just, I thought it was brilliant the way it was executed. Third favorite is the original Saw, which, like I said, is a terrific film. James Wan, Lee Winnell, everybody involved in it. Number 4 for me is probably one that people don't like that much, and that's Saw 5. And I like this one because Agent Strom is trying to identify who the new Jigsaw killer is, because at this point John Kramer's dead, and I just thought it was kind of cool to like go back and see how Jigsaw recruited his apprentice and how that person took over. This one, I think, is one of the strongest entries. Number 5 for me is going to be Saw 3. This was a lot more intimate movie, following Saw 2, which had a much bigger cast and a much bigger playing field. This was a lot more personal. This one was originally supposed to be the conclusion of the franchise, and I'm really glad it wasn't, because I felt like this one left a lot of unanswered questions. So part of me was like, I don't know how this one could have been the conclusion. There were some things that happened in this film that didn't get resolved by the end, so I felt like it did leave things open for a 4th film, and maybe that was their intention overall, because they knew that this one was going to play really big. Next one for me is going to be Jigsaw. I like this film a lot. I've only watched it a handful of times. I've watched the other films in the franchise a little bit more. But revisiting it, I think it really brings you back into the world of Saw. It does have different directors, and it does kind of turn down the gore factor a little bit more than the other ones, but that's fine because I still think the story was interesting, and it had some twists and turns that I didn't see coming. I think some of the characters in this are a little irritating, and that's kind of where, when I start to get down to the lesser films, which I still enjoy. Like I said, I like all of the films in this franchise. It usually comes down to the characters being irritating and not ones that you really root for. But I still think this film is really interesting. I was shocked that they were going to make another one, and I think it worked out well, and again, it was an enjoyable film. Number 7 for me is going to be Saw 4. This used to be my least favorite, but I've grown to appreciate it a little bit more. The reason initially why I wasn't a big fan of it is because Riggs is the main character in it. Not that he's a bad actor, but he wasn't really a character that you knew much about, and I felt like they had killed off some of the best characters at this point. So it was kind of hard to sort of get behind him and what he was going through. But watching it again a few times, I really did enjoy this execution of this one. I like how it starts with Jigsaw's autopsy and kind of goes through, how everything else has played out, the next game, if you want to call it that. And it really surprised me, the route that they went with this one. But it answered a lot of the questions that I thought Saw 3 had, so I was very happy about that. There's a few things that happen at the end of Saw 3, and I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense. And then this one picks up and kind of explains all that. So I really like that element of this film. Yeah, it's not a bad film. It was Darren Lynn Bousman's swan song of this series. Of course, he's coming back to do Spiral now. But yeah, I think it's a great film, and like I said, I enjoy watching it. And my last favorite film in the Saw franchise is the last one that came out 10 years ago, and that is Saw the Final Chapter. This one to me is like, the acting in this is pretty bad. Not to say it's absolutely horrific in any way, but there's some people in this one that just I wasn't really crazy about, and there are some strong leads. I did think Sean Patrick Flannery was really good in this. I thought it was a good resolution. I was glad to see a main character come back that had only been in the original film. I thought that was done pretty well, but I thought it could have been handled a little bit better and could have been fleshed out a little bit more. I still love this film. If this was going to be the final Saw film, I think it went out pretty well. So yeah, that's it. Just talking about, like I said, the Saw franchise and what it means to me. Yeah, I just thought I'd talk about this franchise. I haven't talked about it in a number of years, and the fact that we do have a new entry coming out in 2021, even though it's got a different title. It's going to be related to the Saw films, and I'm curious to see what that's going to be like. So if you are a fan of the Saw films, let me know which one's your favorite in the comment section below. Would love to hear from everyone. And as always, thanks so much for dropping by the Horror Zone. I hope everyone's doing well, and I promise there's some really good content coming soon. Take it easy. Stay scared as always.